Well, the first panelist, I'll start from left, Jussi Kumpula, please.
So, hello everybody, my name is Jussi Kumpula. I'm Managing Director of Metsähallitus Forestry company. Our company is a subsidiary of Metsähallitus, so I represent state forest in Finland. And I have a large experience, over 30 years experience in Metsähallitus in different positions, but I have also working in different countries like in Canada, Australia, Honduras, and a bit in Brazil as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
In Sweden also.
Sweden as well. Max, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Maximilian Schulte. I'm German and I do my PhD at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences since 2020. I focus in my PhD about climate impact assessments from the product level, forest product level, over assessments about forest management, how it influences the climate to the entire forest sector, meanwhile also making applications of a forest sector model.
Hello everybody, my name is Liisa Rohweder and I'm the CEO of WWF Finland. It's my honor to be today here in this panel. I have 40 years experience on sustainable development. It was established in 1986 and after that I have been working on that and I have also a PhD degree on that.
Thank you. And Elisabet.
Yeah, my name is Elisabet Salander Björklund and I have spent more than 40 years in forestry and forest industry. I spent my first 13 years in the state forest and then 15 years in Stora Enso in different executive management positions and the last 9 years in Bergvik Skog. I have also been working quite a lot with sustainability issues within Stora Enso. At that period I was there. I'm also a private forest owner, a board professional nowadays. Among other things, I'm also a board member of the Swedish State Forest, Sveaskog.
Thank you very much. All very impressive. Well, we will move on to the first topics. We saw some of it this morning, that well, these trends in the forest industry do not seem always so flourishing, so positive. So what if we would lose the forest industry from Europe? And lose maybe strongly reduced or even totally lose it. You see, how do you see that? How would that impact Metsähallitus, or what is your view on what are the pros and cons of that when we lose the forest industry?
So thank you. My point of view is quite practical and forest owners' view, because we are selling roundwood to the industry, and I feel that future quite confident. If you think big picture and population in the world, it's growing all the time, standard of living is growing, it means that the demand of these products are growing. I think so. And the fact is that we have to replace these fossil-based products by forest products, for example. That's the reason I feel this future confident, and I feel that our forest industry will flourish at least to the next 30 years, because the industry will make investments for the 30 years at a time. And after that, they have to check time. Is it time to make a new investment or no?
So you have a much more positive view of
I feel positive, but I feel also that if you think about the south and north, it means that the production will increase in the south more than in the north. Because the population is there and there are resources, there are possibilities. But if you think of the south, in the south there might become a conflict between agricultural production, because forestry is competing with the agriculture at the same time, and that's the fact. And in the future we might face a lack of food in some areas.
Maybe I do not always follow the line there. So maybe Liisa, from a WWF point of view, how would you see that if we lose the forest industry in Europe?
I would say that from biodiversity perspective, it's always important that the forest industry is sustainable. So it doesn't make any difference wherever the industry is located. You always need to think about the biodiversity, because also the industry's future depends on the state of the biodiversity. And on the other hand, as we heard already in these high-level scientific modeling presentations, so that there is evidence that there will be more pulp production in south. But on the other hand, I think that maybe the like value-added production, like bio-based products, will then anyway move or be more based here in the Nordics, where we have also the technological competence to make those products. Biodiversity anyway is the key, and it doesn't matter where the forest industry is located. You always need to think about that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we may come back to that. Max, how would you, maybe you want to, it's up to you of course, but maybe you want to highlight also the carbon aspect.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's up to you.
From biodiversity, I would shift over to the climate effects actually. And if we want to achieve climate change mitigation in the forest sector in Sweden nowadays, from the past studies which were published over the past years, we know that by decreasing, for example, the harvest intensity in Sweden, we would get a large climate benefit from the additional forest carbon sink in the Swedish forests. So that goes into the direction of the scenario that you were just mentioning, if we reduce, so to say, forest industry's activity in Europe. This is nice from the Swedish perspective if we get this additional forest carbon sink, where we also know that the foregone or the not not the realized substitution effect will not cancel off this gain in forest carbon. But the point is now that also based on the forest sector models that we have today, we don't know how large the forest carbon leakage will be. And leakage here is a central term, I would say, because this gain in forest carbon that we may have here in Sweden, we don't know how much forest carbon we may lose in the rest of the world, and where in the rest of the world that may be, because this then depends on the trade.
Yeah, thank you. And Elisabet, you want to reflect on this?
Yeah, I think that to begin with, forestry is a long-term thing to work with. And I mean, sustainability is a key and is really hard in working with forestry. And I absolutely do believe that we will have long-term a forest industry up here in the north part of the world also. I do think that the industry will change anyhow. I mean, we will not produce exactly the same type of products. We will produce new type of products. But I absolutely believe that we will have an industry up here in the future. That's my belief.
Thank you. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to comment or add. Birger here, please. Yeah, the mic is coming. The online people.
Just a comment on the leakage. It was mentioned by you. I just want to point to the fact that there are at least 3 studies on leakage. And they all show more or less the same, that the leakage is between 70 and 90%. Studies done by Risto here and Marit Kallio and myself and others. So we know a lot about the leakage. Thank you.
Antti, here's another question here in the middle.
Thanks for Gertian for a very provocative question. There are areas in the world where there is no forest industry and where there is forest and that forest is unmanaged. And there the good old Mother Nature takes care of the forests, meaning the carbon cycle is natural based on the large-scale forest disturbances in boreal zone, and also the if we would move to that situation really in Europe, it would only mean that forest would be managed by Mother Nature. So it would turn to the same situation where we are in California, that it's rather only management would be firefighting and clearing roads to be able to traffic. But it would be really extreme, but there would be a forest management, a very, very natural one.
Yeah. Thank you. You are certainly, Jussi and Elisabet, as forest owner or manager perspective, you are very positive about the future of the forest industry in Europe. Is that wishful thinking, or is it? Because there are these well, the resource challenges, the competition with the South challenges. So, but
maybe our character is optimistic.
yeah,
But
that's
of
always
course,
good.
I think that everybody, and especially forest owners, we understand the risks what we are facing in the future. When the climate is coming warmer and warmer, it means that there are much more, as we heard, bark beetle, for example, forest fires, they are increasing, wind damages, storm damages, they are increasing, but still the forests are growing better in the north. That was a positive result, really, and that's what I suppose as well. And I think that we can't avoid the climate change, but we have to adapt to that. We can do it by forest management, so that we will manage mixed forest, not monocultures anymore, especially spruce or pine. That's one thing, and so on. And especially in the Middle Europe, we know that when they have these spruce damages, bark beetle damages, it's based on the history that they have planted spruce on the area which used to be mixed forest.
Liisa wanted to add on.
Yeah, and it is also, the truth is that in case we want to be climate neutral by 2040 in EU, that means that we also need forestry to compensate the kind of fossil fuel-based materials with long-lasting and resource-effective bio-based materials.
If I may, I think we have to remember that already today, products from forests are actually substituting fossil products, and we do a work already there today. And I think that there is a lot of research ongoing how we can manage our forest in a better way in the future. For example, when it comes to spruce, we know that there is several type of spruce trees that are more have the problem with rotten and get rotten very easily, and we can find the mothers and fathers that will not do that, and we can make through some, for example, the research projects on somatic embryonesis, where we can try to plant the right plants in the right place. So I am very optimistic about that research can help us to actually work against these problems that we see from climate change. Actually.
Liisa, I want to come back to one remark. You said we need forestry, and that is that's certainly very positive. But do we also need a different type of forestry in Europe or in the north that pays more respect to biodiversity?
Yeah.
And are the current trends actually going in that right, if we call that a right direction?
Yeah, I'm pragmatic, and that's why I said that we need forestry, because we need the products that we consume. But the key thing is that we need less. So at the time we are over-consuming, we are using the natural resources 1.5 times more than nature provides us per year, and here in North 3 times more. So the key is that we need to produce and consume much less. And that also comes to the fact that forestry as well needs to be more resource effective. So not any kind of forestry, but the products which will last long and which will also give food for the green transition and system change in the way that we really make a huge change in the way we live.
Yeah. So first a remark from the audience, Hilanda.
Hello, Nippe Hylander. I was a former member of the selection committee, so this is fascinating to see what has happened over the years. My question concerns so to say, let's call it the dynamic impacts. We heard about dynamic models. The dynamic impacts of reduced harvesting that you're saying. Let me give you 2 examples where this can have. One of the impacts could be that if we change the silviculture so that we have prolonged times, we may get a larger share of sawlogs. That has a dynamic impact on the products market. The other example would be what Jan mentioned, that we do see in Central Europe an increasing production of hardwoods. So will we, within Europe, develop more of the use of hardwoods in construction, not only in pulp, where it's pretty much used? And one good example I saw in ETH in Zurich 2 years ago, where they were saying, we have too much beech here, too much beech wood. Couldn't we use that in a smart way when we produce cross-laminated timber? Because it's even better than the softwoods in compression mode. So that's a way of dynamic effect on the whole system. Do you have any comments on that? Maybe the question goes to the presenters actually, but to the four of you, thank you.
Yeah, I think that was it for me or for everybody? You are glad to answer.
Okay.
Elisabet.
If I start, I absolutely believe that, as I said earlier, I think our industry will change. And for example, we know that we will have more birch in our forest in Sweden in the future. And already now there is discussions ongoing and how can we take care of that. And there was a memorandum of understanding actually signed with France just a few weeks ago, where we will look into this part and look upon how can we develop new products out of hardwood. France has also a lot of hardwoods, which they don't use very efficiently today, actually.
And yes, from my perspective, we need products where the carbon stays long. So that's key important. And maybe the forest specialist can answer more.
Okay. I was thinking to put this question to Max, because you are looking in the wood flows and the efficiency.
I can also comment on that, because what both of you have said, I wanted to synthesize a little bit. Substitution and complementing actually the products on the market. I think it is very important to bear in mind that communicating a substitution effect that may be too large actually doesn't benefit the climate in the end. It is very important to communicate the substitution effect, which is the climate benefit in terms of the fossil greenhouse gas avoidance from using wood products over non-wood products, or concrete in construction, steel in construction, plastics and so forth, by the use of bio-based products. This is something that is really important here, not to miscommunicate. And the substitution effect, regarding your term that you use, dynamics, here it is important to bear in mind that, for example, Sweden wants to become climate neutral by 2045. Other countries like China, they want to become climate neutral by 2060 or so. So the fossil greenhouse gas emission balances, they will change in a very dynamic way, or they should, but we don't know how they will actually do so. So these are just some thoughts about this.
I fully agree that if you think about the forestry and carbon sink and these forest damages in Central Europe, they will change spruce to the beech, mainly beech. And we don't know after 30 or after 50 or 100 years what is the demand of the beech. It means that there's a great demand for new product development concerning beech, especially beech, because there are good quality beech and low quality beech. And I feel so that more or less, if we don't think about more long rotation time, but we have to think how we can use this engineer wood of small scale trees for long lasting construction, for example.
Yeah. And I will give you the word, and I want to reiterate that the young scientists are certainly welcome to chip in. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Markku Ellila. I'm the CEO of Technology Academy Finland. We hand out the Millennium Technology Prize. My question concerns the use of energy. In Gert-Jan's presentation, you showed quite a pessimistic view on how the fossil versus renewable energy is evolving. However, in the last couple of years, the International Energy Agency has renewed their view on the world energy outlook considerably. And if you look at several European countries, where the power grid is the limiting factor in the increase of renewable energy usage in electricity, there can be a significant surplus of low-cost energy in many countries in the next 10 years, even 5 years. Do you see opportunities for the forest sector in using, if the cost of energy has been a constraint, if abundant amounts of low-cost energy is available? Does that represent opportunities, and what kind of opportunities?
But low-cost renewable energy,
Yes.
or renewable? Yes.
Well, I don't believe in low-cost renewable energy, to begin with. Actually, I mean, in reality, I think that we should be aware of that energy will be expensive in the future. I think that from different perspectives. And of course, there is still a possibility to use more energy out from wood. In most countries, we don't use the whole tree yet. So there is still good opportunity to use more of the tree than we do today, actually, for different products, not only for energy, but also perhaps for other products in the future, more advanced products.
Anyone else on the energy?
Yeah, I would say that like forest products and wood, they are so valuable that the last thing is to use them for burning. And of course, we still do need them for a specific kind of transportation as a biofuel, but that's only for a certain period. But anyway, so that the wood products should really be like developed to higher. Yeah.
I also fully agree with Liisa about this cascade principle, so that forest should use the most valuable products first, and then just the rest to the energy. And now, if we know that lignin, for example, is used finally to the energy. If we find some new products made of lignin, what will be the energy production after that?
Yeah.
Just a small comment.
Liisa.
And also, we need to remember that we need to reduce the consumption of energy, because we cannot, continue the way we have done it so far. That also comes to your pricing of energy. Yes. So energy efficiency is the best fuel.
Yeah.
I agree to this point, and I think it's very important that you mention this here, because it could lead, if there was a surplus of renewable energy in Sweden, for example, all the black liquor, for example, in the pulp mills, it would not have to be burned, which would make exempt opportunities for producing all kinds of different products that many young researchers here are putting their research on. But my concern is then it's a sort of a rebound effect. So you save something here, but then instead of that you produce in the end just a complement to the overall production load. So this is something I would see a bit cautious.
Yeah. Nicola had a question.
So, hello, thanks. I'm Nicola Bozzolan, young researcher. I'm sorry, I have to step back a bit from this conversation of bioenergy to come back to the lack of food in the future. And so, because I think it's really interesting. So I was wondering, like, okay, we have seen to the presentation there are many disturbances. We also see that the forest in the north is growing better, and we also know that probably in the next 20, 30 years we still have a lot of coniferous wood, which is basically, the industry now is specialized, especially in of conifer wood. But my question is, like, now the approach of forestry, I have the feeling is going more to mixed forest, mixed forest not only at age, not only on species, but also age. So trying to really create a complex structure to improve biodiversity. So my question is, especially for industry, is like, how do you see this into the future regarding like using, difficulties of harvesting, of using also different type of diameters, different type of species, and considering the fact that we are highly specialized in using conifers. And the second question is, how do how do you, what's your vision regarding like possible, lack of resource? So how's the forest industry is going to adapt to this lack or possible lack? Because finally, final note is that bio-based, while innovative bioproduct is actually a niche for now. It's not gonna it's not taking a lot of raw materials.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. Who wants to take this? The complex.
Oh, if I start first to the second question, if the industry doesn't have enough wood, what are their choice? Just close the doors or reduce the production. No other choice. That's so easy. But then we go to the mixed forest. I think that here in the Northern Europe, we are lucky because we don't have too many tree species. We have mainly pine, spruce, two sort of species of birds, and then some other broadleaves. No more. And we know that for pine and for birds and good quality spruce, there is a demand enough in the coming future. We don't know what's happening after 50 years, but that's how it looks like.
But the spruce in the southern Sweden, southern Norway, it's already affected by this bark beetle. Is an enormous risk.
It's a huge risk, and it will come worse. And I have a feel that whether it is atmosphere, it fluctuates. And now, I don't know, are we now going to the better way? But finally, the trend is so that the climate is coming warmer, and these bark beetle damages will increase. That's a fact.
Yeah, there's two questions here in front and one in the back there.
Hi, Per Österberg, Kopparfors Skogar. I was wondering if you go 50 years from now and imagine we take up no fossils any longer. We take away 80% of the energy source we have today and probably for other products too. And we also add 1 billion of people, at least, I guess. Can you imagine how the world functions at that time? How do we live? How do we make our housing? How do we have the products that we need for living, even if we go down, especially we in the West, the prosperous world? How can we not use what we can grow on the land in farming, in forestry? It has to be really, really important to balance there. How much can we get from the land and still have the biodiversity? It's really a balance point it's all about. But we tend at the moment to talk very much from where we are today, and we take small steps against the future. I don't think any of the models we have seen today will work, explaining how it will work 50 years from now if we don't start there and backtrack how to come there.
Who wants to comment? Elisabet.
I can continue that. I think that's very interesting what you bring up here, and as also some of the presenters said in the morning here, that you really have to start where we will be and how do we come there. And I absolutely do believe that we have actually a responsibility from sustainability point of view to actually secure that our forest has a nice growth in the future and find different ways to increase the growth. At the same time, of course, as we take care of the biodiversity. But we should also remember that if you look upon the biodiversity crisis up in the Nordics, okay, we can do absolutely more than we have done. But if you look on the south, how does it look there? I mean, they have even bigger problems on the biodiversity side than we have up here in the north. And it's easy to forget that, actually, when we talk about the south.
Yeah, that was a very good question, and I really think that although the challenge is so huge, we still need to do all we can. And also considering the biodiversity crisis in South, it's because of us, because we are the ones who have started this overconsumption. But anyway, the key is that we really need to combat climate crisis and biodiversity at the same time, because they are so heavily linked to each other, and to do all what we can. So we We have no other choice. And anyway, as we know, so we are all dependent. All what we are doing is dependent on biodiversity and climate, of course, because they are linked. Economies, our food security, health, everything. Economies.
Thank you.
Forest industry.
I
Sure.
could
Yeah.
also just briefly comment on this. I mean, we've seen in France a few years ago what happens if the price for petrol or oil increases a lot. Then movements such as the Gilets jaunes start, and then I think the focus about the problems the society faces shifts away from this climate or biodiversity debate also. I think these are realities we would face in these kind of situations. Yeah, I leave it with that.
The inclusive side, indeed, of
A small
society.
comment. Maybe the modelers can help us here. We heard
No.
modeling in the morning.
The lady in the back.
Yes, Joanna Hagelberg Stora Enso. Unfortunately not a young researcher, but I wish I could restart my career and be one. Building on then, like many presenters have said today, that the future growth in forest is still in the south, meaning southern hemisphere even. What opportunities and threats do you see that gives us as an industry?
I have to start again.
Jussi.
Of course, for the industry, it's possible to expand the industry to the south and globally and establish new pulp plants and so on. That's the one possibility, of course. But other is the risk that are they producing that much, for example, the products which are competing with the products what we are using at the moment. And I feel that that's first facing the birds, of course, but of course the softwood pulpwood made of that. That's because they are breeding of, for example, eucalyptus. It's so quickly, so we don't know what's going to happen if they use, for example, gene manipulation. What's going to happen after coming years? It's a risk, of course.
Yes, I can say a few words also. I think that one opportunity with production in the south hemisphere is, of course, that the rotation periods are much shorter than they are up here in the north. So you can change quicker than we can do up here, absolutely. But on the other hand, I mean, south hemisphere, we talk about warmer climate, you need the rain, and can we really foresee what happens with the rain? And I think that is actually a threat to the plantations in the southern hemisphere already today, lack of rain actually, which the trees really need.
But does this lead even to more land, well, sometimes we call it land grabbing in the south for the production in the north? And there's already a lot of land grabbing going on for carbon credits, for conservation, and then also for production. Well, something to think about. Who was I think that was, somewhere. Oh,
Thomas.
now there's a lot.
A lot.
There was someone there, wasn't it? Yeah. And then Ron, and then Johanna.
Okay, hi, I'm Thomas Turesson. I'm here in the position as a board member of Kopparforsskogar. In Europe, we have a net emission of carbon dioxide of circa 4,000 megatons per year. And the goal in the European Union is to reduce that until zero in 2042. That's a very, very challenging goal. It's a good goal, but it's very challenging. And the thing is that we need carbon for many things, not only for energy. We need them for buildings, for packaging, and to some extent probably also for energy. For example, should we have aeroplanes in the future, we probably need some sort of bio-based carbon. And my conclusion from this is that we can't really both get away from the fossils, because that is the really big thing. We also need to use the forest. And my question then is to the very wise people here. Do you see any other possibilities to get those carbon molecules to what we need in the future? Because we will need carbon molecules than forestry.
Max,
Yeah,
maybe that's
maybe,
closest to you.
Yeah, like a spontaneous thought about this is, I wrote down the question, what do we need? You said we need construction materials, we need the energy, we need the packaging. And when you said packaging, I was then wondering, do we need the packaging? I mean, there are other trends for like a more sustainable society or so that don't include packaging, for example. So in Germany, there are shops, for example, where you come with your package yourself, so to say, and you don't need additional containers for the foodstuff that you buy. So that would make space, or let's say the volume that you would dedicate for this packaging, you could use then for construction if it is technically possible also. So these are things that would not complement, but they would in fact substitute something here without additional emissions when we speak of the climate.
Yeah. I want to keep the replies a bit shorter because there are more and more hands coming up. Ron Sederoff in the back, one of the laureates from a couple of years ago.
Thank you for the introduction. As an American looking at the forest industry on a global scale, I am amazed that it is possible to grow a tree in Brazil in less than 6 years, and compare that to the time it takes to grow a tree here in Scandinavia, yet the industry here flourishes. Can that continue? The other point I want to make is that we don't exactly know what we're doing. There are major factors that are unknown, and incidents that affect the biology and the climate are becoming more intense with time. And I would ask Mike Winfield about the role of forest pathology, because events such as bark beetle infestations in Canada are greater than we have ever seen infestations before, and that the future of forestry may be determined on a biological basis, and the biodiversity inherent in our populations looking forward. I would also argue, as a biotechnologist, that it has not been discussed whether there is a future in forestry for the directed genetic modification of trees, which would expand the ability to grow species and to make products in places that have not been considered before.
Yeah, maybe that's good that you respond to that. I don't know. Yeah.
When a very eminent scientist puts one on the spot, and I actually had a different question completely. So Ron has raised a really important issue, and quite frankly, I mean, I'm a tree health specialist and work in that community, and we're really, really worried. Ron, you're referring to beetle, and a couple of others in the talks today referred to mountain pine beetle, then European spruce beetle, so Ipstopographus here, and these tipping points that are being reached where everything starts to collapse. And there are other examples. All of those are native pests and pathogens. And their impact is being driven, so there's a shoot leaf blight pathogen that wasn't in Scandinavia some years ago and is spreading and moving up, and it's definitely a climate change issue, or the Araucaria dying in the south of Chile, many thousands and thousands of hectares. That's the one side. The other side is the introduced pests and pathogens. And I oftentimes ask a question, when is Europe what you talk about the south, which is very interesting because I thought you were talking about Spain, but remember, the people forget there's a southern hemisphere, and we should have more of those people in these kinds of audiences to have the fair discussion. But that's another issue. But another huge threat is the introduction of new pests and pathogens, and with these very uniform forests of the boreal, we're just waiting for the next really big one, and those are introduced pests, and their impact is massive. So I mean, quite frankly, and I think Ron, you're sitting up there somewhere, are saying is we need much more science, and we need to communicate the science to the public, actually to governments, to convince, governments are there because of the public. Public vote for the governments. Elisabet, you raised, I think, some of that issue. You talked about root rot, so heterobacity here, really important. That's a relatively easy problem. There is a relatively easy solution. You talked about the genetic modification, but the other is just at harvesting, treating the stumps. And I can tell you that most companies are not doing that because it's expensive and, well, nothing will happen. But once you have a new infection, those centers are there for decades. But big issues, we need more science, but we need a lot more communication with decision makers if we're going to get anywhere. I'm concerned. I'm seriously concerned.
Thank you very much. We have roughly some 10-12 minutes still, so I would like to pick up a few other topics, but there were two. Johanna had a hand, or no? Oh, Henrik first. And then the lady there.
We heard already today that more or less half of the European consumption of forest is for energy. And that, of course, is due to the European Union's policies, which is burning wood is considered climate neutral, which I think is not the fact, but that's the policy. So there, in my view, is a huge reserve of wood. So I wouldn't be that pessimistic regarding use of wood for other purposes. There's a half of the wood is burnt. Mm-hmm. So, and that's a lot. You had, I think it was in Jan-Gert, in your, it says 300 million cubic meters.
Yeah.
So my question is, have you considered that in the pessimistic views on northern forest industries?
I can shortly answer from the EU policy perspective. EU is making the new climate policy next spring, and the Economic Forum of Finland, ECO, already published their vision, what should happen. So you are very powerful, all of you. So you just go into this politics and try to make EU make a change there so that the wood is no more burned in EU level. That's what we are trying to do, at least.
But it's very hard if these subsidies are there to steer the wood flow in a more efficient way. Yep. Johanna may want to...
Yeah, I'm actually continuing from Henrik's point, so that when wood is burned, quite many of that comes from the processes as carbon dioxide. How do you see the role of biogenic carbon dioxide? If we have this cheap electricity, we have hydrogen economy, then we could have closed circles and make a lot of things. We could mitigate the climate change simultaneously, provide raw materials for the people, because everybody's talking about consumption, but what are the actions how can we reduce consumption? That's another thing, but that's not my question. The biogenic carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I would like to comment on this and then link also then to the Global South, because there are large opportunities for improved cooking devices in households. There a lot of fuel wood is actually used still nowadays, and if these kitchen facilities, so to say, or stoves are improved, there's, I think, for the climate as well as for the health of the persons, there's a big potential.
Yes, Elisabet?
If I may also make a comment in this area, perhaps not exactly about what you said, but I think that I think our biggest problem is that the fossil fuels are too cheap. And we very often forget that in the discussion. So the question is, what are we going to do about the fact that the fossil fuels are too cheap?
Very true.
Yeah, indeed. You saw in the spike of the energy prices 1 year ago how fast people start to convert their energy provision and reduce energy consumption. But of course, it hits the people with a small wallet very hard. And that's something not to forget. Yes.
Hi, my question is a bit related to this topic, and it also works especially on the point about increased communication. I'm wondering, like, if you have suggestions on how we can improve communication between stakeholders. For example, I have noticed some issues, like, for example, one time a representative from a forestry company was talking at our institute, and I asked them, are you interested to know how trees respond to climate change? And they said, no, we already know. And I was like, but then in addition to this, like, it's peculiar that, you know, there are people who, I guess many of us know, who are actively trying to protect forests in Europe for the sake of biodiversity. But if there was maybe more communication, that they knew, okay, well, if this area is protected, then actually the deforestation will be transferred to the global south, it might change their decision making. And I think I just wonder about any suggestions you have for people making time for each other to communicate and maybe come to a decision together, because it seems like loads of people do have like best intentions. Just
Any of the panel members want to reflect on communication?
Communication is that's
please.
right. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Communication is really needed, and very strongly. So when we all are behind a certain thing, it will like start moving onwards like a snowball impact effect. Yeah, communication is very important. It's no use to do science, if I may say, unless you have the means how to communicate about the results. It's almost, that makes research impactful. And research is done to change societies, to change how we are doing, behaving, whatever the science is and research is about.
Is our, this is a good point that I also had at least on the list, is our education really ready? We also have quite some people from universities here, of course. Is our education ready for these big changes and incorporating the communication and the social sciences? Well, we see, for example, well, we did a PhD summer school in September in Bialowice in East Poland. There were 27 PhD students there. And they all do some research concerning forests, but there was not one, let's say, traditional forester amongst them. So it's people doing global vegetation modeling, it's people doing satellites, it's people doing disturbances, it's soil sciences, all around the forest. But, well, let's say, I don't know if we need that, but the traditional forester was not there, and that's remarkable, I think. Yes, Antti and then Sten.
Thanks for raising the issue of a traditional forester. I take two things related with climate change. We are blaming that for everything and then say that this is result of a climate change. Obviously, that is a really super important factor, but tree species have their biological lifespan. And in Eastern Canada in the 80s, I was there doing training, and there was huge deadwood areas of ABS and spruce. And when I went there 30 years after that all had recovered, and the biologists or foresters said that, well, the lifespan of ABS there is about 75 years, and then the whole ecosystem collapses. And I have a hypothesis that also the spruce that we are now seeing dying here in the flatlands of Europe where we have planted it, besides it has been a success story starting from 50s, but now it's ending. I have a hypothesis that if we now regenerate, plant the spruce again, it will survive 40, 50 years. And again, it becomes so old that it doesn't tolerate the new climate. But really, like the modeler said, that we should not only look at the the climate, but also the basic biology and forestry before making this vast decision to convert the whole forestry system to entirely something else.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Sten.
Yeah, thank you. I have 3 comments, and I will start with the educational system. How the education is working, it's forming the view of thinking for a very long time, and it's sort of setting the frame of a profession. And if you are going to change things, I think we need a systems revolution in the educational forest system. That is one issue. The second issue is the communication. To communicate the difficult issues, you have to reach the people in the general public. And that is extremely difficult if we want to have a change. And we have not tackled how do we communicate these big changes to the general public so they understand it. If you are not getting the general public on track, nothing will happen. I will give you one example. I was speaking a couple of weeks ago for big forest owners, private forest owners here in Sweden. And I was speaking about how the world is influencing it. And they got mad with me by saying, we are not here to hear what's going on in the world. We want to hear what should we do with the Swedish forest. So we have a huge communication problem. The third issue is with the dimension of CO2. We should not forget that CO2 is a valuable raw material. We should use it. We should do a lot of science in trying to utilize it in our production. Too little is done on that issue. Thank you.
Liisa,
one thing how to solve this communication issue is, and here are many deans and rectors from universities, universities should invest on communication department as well, much more, at least in Finland where I come from, much more, so that we know what's happening there in everyday's language.
And it's a different kind of communication.
Yes, yes, right.
Max, may I? About education, you are still.
Yeah, I'm still a PhD student. Yeah, exactly.
Still a bit student.
I was thinking about my own institution, SLU, as a role model kind of university in the topics that we address here in these days. And SLU, I don't know the exact dates, I just know that it intended to double the number of students until, I don't know, 25 or 30 or so. But actually, the trend is the opposite. And I can't understand that. I'm fascinated by these topics, and I really don't know why so few students want to enroll in these kind of programs and be part of this dialogue and action making towards this transformation of a more sustainable society. Yes.
Then, well, it's 4 minutes before the lunch, but we can also close the session here, I think. If there's no other very burning point that someone wants to bring in, I have other topics, but maybe it's not good to rush through some other topics right now. Then I want to thank the panelists very much for an active participation.
Thank you.